I was already on edge the minute I pulled into my parents' driveway. Family meetings were never fun, but this one felt like walking straight into a firing squad. The house looked the same as it always did, 2 stories, pale brick, that maple tree in the front yard I used to climb as a kid, but stepping inside felt like being shoved back into every role I had tried to escape. I hadn't even dropped my duffel bag by the door before my sister started in on me. "There she is," Victoria said, her voice dripping with that sweet poison she's perfected over the years. She was leaning against the kitchen counter, cashmere sweater perfectly pressed, wine glass in hand like she was the queen of this little Ohio kingdom. "I was wondering if you'd make it on time, or if gas money was an issue." I gave her a look. No smile, no laugh. Just that look. But she wasn't done. "You know," she added, turning toward our brother Samuel like I wasn't even there, "Jess has always struggled to keep up. It's not her fault. Not everyone is cut out for, well, success." That was her opening shot. I could feel my jaw tighten, but I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of seeing me rattled. My brother, good old Samuel, the golden boy surgeon, just offered me a sympathetic shrug, like he was sorry she said it but not sorry enough to step in. "Nice to see you too, Vic," I said, dropping my bag and heading for the dining room. "Always a pleasure to be greeted like family." She smirked, sipping her wine, following me with her eyes like a hawk, and that's when she delivered the line that made the whole room shift. "You probably can't even help with rent, can you?" She laughed. "But don't worry, we'll figure something out for Mom and Dad. Some of us are doing just fine." The words hung in the air like smoke. My mom froze halfway through setting the table. My dad, sitting in his recliner, cleared his throat like he wanted to say something but thought better of it. Samuel fiddled with his watch, pretending to check the time. And me? I just sat down at that table, folded my hands, and let the silence stretch. It wasn't the first time I'd been called poor. Not by her, not by people like her, and every single time, it lit a fire in my chest that I had to bury deep just to get through the moment. I fought in combat zones, led soldiers through missions where one bad call could get people killed. But somehow, facing my sister's smug little smirk in our childhood kitchen made me feel more cornered than an ambush ever had. She thought she'd scored the winning point. She always did. And the worst part, my parents didn't even correct her. They didn't say, "Jess is doing fine." They didn't say, "She's accomplished more than you know." They just let it sit there, like maybe she was right, like maybe I really was the broke middle child who needed saving. I watched her pour herself another drink, still smiling, still basking in the glow of her own voice, and I thought about how many times I'd bitten my tongue in this house. Too many to count. When she landed her first big case in New York, the whole family treated it like she'd cured cancer. When Samuel became head of his department in Chicago, it was front-page news in our living room. When I came home from Afghanistan with a bronze star pinned to my uniform, the reaction was more along the lines of, "That's nice, dear, but when are you going to settle down?" That's the dynamic. That's the script. Victoria shines, Samuel excels, and Jess is just Jess, the soldier, the odd one out. The one with nothing to show for it except a uniform and a few medals that don't mean much at family dinners. So when she called me poor, laughed about me not even being able to help with rent, it wasn't just a joke. It was the family's way of putting me back in my place. And if I've learned anything over the years, it's that they'll keep doing it as long as I let them. The table filled with noise again, Samuel talking about some complicated surgery he'd performed, Victoria bragging about a new client, my mom fussing with the silverware. On the surface, it looked like any other family dinner, but underneath it, the air was heavy with the weight of her words. I leaned back in my chair watching them. The clink of glasses, the hum of small talk, my sister's voice rising above everyone else's like she was the main character in every scene. And me, the quiet supporting role, expected to nod along and laugh at the right moments. That was the part she wanted me to play. But here's the thing about being underestimated. It gives you space. Space to plan. Space to watch. Space to hold your cards until the exact right moment to lay them down. So I sat there, listening to her rattle on, letting her believe she had won, letting her think she had me pegged as the broke, aimless sister who couldn't even pitch in for rent. Every laugh she gave at my expense, every glance she threw at Samuel to confirm she was right, just added fuel to the fire I was already holding inside. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to defend myself. Not tonight. Because the truth was, everything she thought she knew about me was about to come crashing down. And the louder she laughed, the harder that crash was going to hit. When dessert hit the table, she leaned over with that smug grin and whispered, just loud enough for the others to hear, "Don't worry, Jess. We'll make sure you're not left behind. Somebody's got to look out for you." No. I looked her dead in the eye, smiled just enough to make her second-guess herself and said, "I appreciate your concern, Vic." Then I picked up my fork, took a bite, and let the moment hang there. Because sometimes the best revenge is letting people think they've won right before you show them they haven't even begun to see the whole picture. The fork was still in my hand when the memory hit me hard. Like the clink of silverware was all it took to drag me back to a different table, a different fight. Years ago. High school, senior year. Same dining room, same polished wood table, same faces, just younger and sharper. Back then, Samuel was the golden boy prepping for med school interviews. Victoria was polishing her college essays and practicing that smile she would later weaponize in court. And me? I was already plotting a very different path. I'd told them straight out at dinner one night, no sugarcoating, I'm enlisting. The silence that followed was so loud I could hear the clock ticking in the living room. My mom dropped her fork. My dad stared at his plate like it might offer him an escape. Samuel raised an eyebrow but said nothing. And Victoria, of course, laughed. "You're kidding, right? You're going to throw your life away being, what? Some grunt?" I didn't flinch. I just looked her in the eye and said, "Number, I'm serious." That was the first time I realized how quickly my family could close ranks against me. My mom's voice trembled when she tried to talk me out of it. "Jess, honey, you're smart. You could get into a state school, maybe even better if you apply yourself. Why would you waste that on the military?" My dad finally looked up, his voice firmer. "You'll regret this decision for the rest of your life." That line stuck. It cut deep. At 17, hearing your own father declare that your choice will ruin you, it leaves a scar. Victoria jumped on the pile, of course. "You just don't want to do the work of college. You think boot camp will be easier? You'll be crawling in mud while the rest of us are building real careers." And close. I remember gripping the edge of the table, trying to stay calm. The truth was, I wanted something real. I wanted to test myself in ways a classroom never could. But in that house, ambition only counted if it came with a degree and a shiny job title. After dinner, I overheard them in the kitchen. Samuel told my parents, "She'll be back in 6 months. She'll hate it and come home." Victoria's voice carried over his. "Or she won't even make it through basic." I packed my bags anyway. Leaving home with nothing but a duffel and a contract that said U.S. Army felt like stepping off a cliff. My mom cried at the bus station. My dad shook my hand like he was saying goodbye to a stranger. Victoria didn't bother showing up. That first night in the barracks, surrounded by strangers who would soon become brothers and sisters in arms, I realized something. For the first time, I wasn't in anyone's shadow. Nobody cared who my siblings were, what school I didn't attend, or how much money I didn't have. All that mattered was whether I could keep up. And I did more than keep up. The first time I shot expert at the range, I thought about Victoria laughing at me. The first time I ran 5 miles with a pack on my back and didn't break pace, I thought about my dad's words, "You'll regret this." Each push-up, each mile, each training exercise turned into quiet proof that I'd made the right call. But when I came home on leave after basic, nothing had changed here. I walked into the same kitchen, wearing the uniform I'd worked my ass off to earn, and the first words out of Victoria's mouth were, "So, how's boot camp? Do they let you clean toilets yet?" She said it in front of my parents too, and nobody corrected her. My mom gave me that weak smile, the one that says she's trying to be supportive without really believing in me. My dad asked if I was thinking about college after my service, like the army was just a temporary detour. Samuel just said, "Stay safe," and went back to his medical journals. The medal I'd just earned meant nothing at this table. The pride I felt in standing straighter, in knowing I'd already accomplished more than most of my high school class would in their entire first year of college, it was invisible to them. I learned to stop talking about it. Every call home turned into small talk. "How's the weather there? Are you eating enough?" I'd keep the real stories to myself, the 20-mile marches, the endless drills, the nights I fell asleep in my boots because I was too tired to take them off. The shadow followed me. even from 1,000 miles away. At family gatherings, Samuel's new scholarships and Victoria's internships were the headline news. My letters from the field went unread. Still, I didn't quit. I doubled down. Each insult, each dismissive comment became fuel. By the time I deployed overseas, I wasn't thinking about proving them wrong anymore. I was thinking about staying alive, keeping my team alive, and doing the damn job. But that night around the dinner table, before any of it happened, I sat there as a teenager, hearing my father predict my failure, hearing my sister laugh, hearing the silence from everyone else. I clenched my fists under the table and made a choice. I would never give them the satisfaction of seeing me crawl back. So when Victoria laughed tonight and said I couldn't even help with rent, I heard the echo of that old laughter. Same voice, same smirk, same belief that I'd always be less. And even though the years in between had proved her wrong 1,000 times over, I realized something important. She still had no idea who I'd become. Her smirk still lingered in my head when my thoughts drifted to sand and heat, a memory sharper than anything she could ever throw at me. Iraq was nothing like the recruiting posters. No polished boots, no heroic soundtrack, just dust, sweat, and the constant tension of not knowing what might explode under your feet. I remember the first patrol that really tested me. We were rolling down a half-paved road outside Bakba, sun beating down like it was trying to melt the metal off our Humvees. The chatter on the radio was clipped, focused. Everyone knew the route was hot. I was in the second vehicle, gripping my M4 a little too tight, trying not to let my nerves show. Then it happened. The blast ripped through the first Humvee, flipping it like a toy. For a split second, everything slowed, the dust cloud rising, the ringing in my ears, the shockwave punching me in the chest. And then reality slammed back. People were screaming, the gunner wasn't moving, and we were still sitting ducks. Training kicked in before fear had the chance to take over. I was out of the vehicle, shouting orders, dragging the wounded out of the kill zone while another teammate laid down cover fire. My hands shook, but they kept working tourniquet on one guy's leg, pressure on another's chest wound. Somewhere in the chaos, I realized I was barking commands like I'd been doing this for years. We got them out. 2 medevacs lifted off that day, and both guys lived. Later, they told me it was my quick action that made the difference. At the time, I didn't think about medals or recognition. I just thought about how close we'd all come to being names on a memorial wall. Weeks later, my CO called me into the tent and handed me a small box. Inside was the Bronze Star medal. For heroism, he said simply. I didn't know what to say. The weight of that medal felt heavier than my body armor. But when I called home to tell my family, the reaction was underwhelming, to put it politely. That's nice, Jess, my mom said. Make sure you're eating enough. You sound thin. My dad's only response was, do they pay you extra for that? And Victoria? She didn't even bother calling me back. So I tucked the medal away. Not out of shame, but because I realized it didn't matter to them. The recognition I craved wasn't coming from my family. It came from the guys I served with, the ones who trusted me to watch their backs. That was enough. Deployment blurred into a rhythm. Patrols, firefights, endless stretches of boredom broken by sudden chaos. I lost friends. Good people. We'd sit around at night, talking about what we'd do when we got home, start a business, buy a car, propose to a girlfriend. Some of those dreams never made it past the desert. For me, the dream was simpler. Prove that my choice wasn't a mistake. Prove that I wasn't the screw-up my sister painted me as, the disappointment my father predicted. One night, after a particularly brutal mission, we sat on the roof of an abandoned building, helmets off, passing around a pack of stale cookies someone's mom had mailed. One of the guys looked at me and said, Monroe, you ever think about what people back home say about us? I laughed, bitter. My family thinks I'm wasting my life. He shrugged. Then screw 'em. You saved Rodriguez today. That's not a waste. That hit me, because in that moment I realized the people who mattered weren't the ones sitting in suburban dining rooms, sipping wine and talking down to me. They were the ones sitting on that rooftop, covered in dust, trusting me with their lives. Still, when I came home on leave, the disconnect was brutal. Friends from high school were finishing college, landing internships, posting graduation photos. Victoria had already made partner track at her firm, Samuel was scrubbing in on surgeries. And me? I was the girl in uniform at the back of the church on Sunday, politely shaking hands, smiling while people said, "Thank you for your service," with no idea what that actually meant. At dinner that week, my mom tried to be encouraging. "You'll have great benefits when you finish your time," she said, as if health insurance was the big selling point of risking my life. My dad asked again if I'd thought about college afterward. Victoria made some crack about how military discipline might finally teach you how to stick with something. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Because how do you explain to people like that what it feels like to drag a bleeding friend to safety? How do you make them understand the bond of brothers and sisters who die for each other? You can't. They didn't want to hear it anyway. So I stopped trying. Instead, I poured myself into the job. More deployments, more missions, more responsibility. By the time I made captain, I'd been through things my family couldn't even imagine. And yet, in their eyes, I was still the middle child with nothing to show for it. The night I got back from Afghanistan for good, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at that bronze star. It should have felt like a triumph, but it just felt hollow. Not because it didn't mean something, it did, but because the people I wanted most to respect it never would. And that's when I made a decision. I didn't need their approval anymore. I'd keep serving, keep building, keep proving myself on my own terms. If my family wanted to keep seeing me as poor, as less, as the odd one out, fine, let them. One day, the truth would speak louder than anything I could ever say. The weight of that decision followed me home like extra gear in my rucksack. After years of dust and sand, walking back into civilian life should have felt like a relief. But instead it felt like stepping into a room where the volume had been turned down to zero. The noise of deployment, the shouts, the gunfire, the roar of helicopters was replaced with silence, and not the peaceful kind, the suffocating kind. I rented a small apartment outside DC, close enough to the Pentagon where I'd been pulled into a temporary assignment, far enough that I could pretend I had a normal life. Every morning I'd pull on the uniform, walk through those security gates, and sit in briefings that made my old college friends sound like interns. Counterterrorism assessments, international strategy sessions, decisions that affected thousands of lives, and yet, to my family, it all translated into, Jess is still just in the Army. Thus, the first time I called home after starting at the Pentagon, my mom answered, "Hi, sweetheart. How's the weather there?" "It's good," I said, holding the phone in one hand, flipping through reports with the other. "Busy week. We're working on a new security framework." She cut me off. "Do they let you have weekends off? You need to get out. Maybe meet someone nice." That was her focus. Not the scope of my work, not the fact that I was now advising on national security, just whether I was still single. My dad got on the line for a minute. "Still in uniform, huh? You know, at some point you'll want a real job with real stability." I wanted to laugh. Stability? I'd survived IED blasts, firefights, 12-hour convoys through hostile territory. But to him, stability meant a desk job with a corporate logo and a pension plan. The silence stretched again when I tried to explain what I was doing. They didn't get it. They didn't even try. And after enough conversations like that, I stopped bringing it up. When holidays rolled around, I'd fly home, walking into that same house where time seemed frozen. The maple tree still towered in the yard. The furniture hadn't changed. Even the wallpaper in the hallway was the same faded pattern from when I was a kid. And yet, everything felt different because I was different. But my family refused to see it. One Christmas, Victoria handed out gifts like she was Santa Claus with a law degree. My parents got expensive wine and gift certificates to luxury resorts. Samuel got a watch that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Then she handed me a box with a smile that told me I wasn't going to like what was inside. I opened it to find a new set of cooking pans. "For when you finally settle down," she said sweetly. "Every woman needs a good set." Axter. I thanked her. Because what else was I supposed to do? But inside I wanted to hurl them across the room. Not because I hated the gift itself, but because it was yet another reminder that she didn't see me for who I was. She saw the version she'd always wanted me to be, the one who would eventually give up this soldier phase and join the rest of them in their narrow definition of success. Samuel wasn't any better. At Easter, he pulled me aside with that doctor's concern etched across his face. "Jess, don't you think it's time to think long-term? The Army's tough on people. You could go back to school, maybe med school if you wanted. You're smart enough. It wasn't advice. It was pity disguised as guidance. Through all of it, I stayed polite, nodded, smiled, played my part, because fighting it would have been pointless. You can't convince people who've already decided who you are. And yet, every time I walked back into my apartment in DC, dropped my bag by the door, and sat down at my desk to review security briefings, the contrast hit me. In one world, I was trusted to analyze threats that shaped foreign policy. In the other, I was the kid sister who needed hand-me-down advice and Walmart gift cards. The silence from my family wasn't just about what they said, it was about what they didn't say. No congratulations when I pinned on captain. No recognition when I briefed senior officials. No pride when I told them about the soldiers I'd mentored. Just silence. It wore on me. One night, after another stilted phone call with my mom, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like you don't exist. I could still hear her voice in my head. You sound tired, Jess. Maybe you should think about a job that's less stressful. Less stressful? Compared to what? Arguing in court? Performing surgeries? I had carried men bleeding out in my arms. I had sat across from generals who expected me to deliver analysis that could prevent an attack, and yet, in their eyes, I was the one who hadn't figured life out. I tried dating during that time too, but it always fizzled. Most guys couldn't handle the hours, the unpredictability, or the fact that I outranked them in every possible sense. So instead, I poured myself into work. The foundation started as a side project, an idea with a few fellow vets who wanted to build something for the ones who always slipped through the cracks. Nights and weekends went into planning Valor House meeting with donors, working through logistics, making sure it wasn't just another charity but a place that actually gave people dignity. I didn't tell my family. Why would I? They wouldn't have cared until there was a ribbon-cutting ceremony they could brag about. Back in Ohio, the gap between us only widened. At one Sunday dinner, I brought a pie I'd bought on the way over, because cooking had never been my priority. Victoria raised an eyebrow. Still can't manage to cook something yourself, huh? I laughed. Because what else could I do? My dad asked if I needed help paying my bills. My mom slipped me coupons for groceries like I was a struggling college kid. Samuel suggested I apply for a hospital admin job he'd heard about. That was the routine, me biting my tongue while they filled the silence with assumptions. But if there's one thing the Army taught me, it's patience. You don't blow your cover until the timing is right. You wait, you watch, and when the moment comes, you make your move. The smell of roasted chicken drifted through the kitchen as I carried plates to the dining room. My mom insisted she could still handle dinner despite her bad hip, but everyone knew Victoria had arranged for catered food. She wanted this spread to look perfect, like her reputation depended on it. Artisan bread, vegetables arranged like a magazine photo, wine labels that screamed price tags more than taste. Victoria placed the dishes on the table with a flourish, as if she'd cooked every last bite. Presentation is everything, she said, casting a quick glance at me just to make sure I caught it. I pulled out a chair, sat down, and watched her hold court. She thrived in moments like this, our parents hanging on her every word, Samuel nodding politely, and me sitting there like background furniture. Dinner had barely started when she launched into her usual monologue. Daniel just closed a major deal for the firm, she announced. It's been a record-breaking quarter. We're considering buying a vacation property in Aspen. Of course you are, I muttered under my breath. What was that? She asked sweetly, pausing mid-sip of her wine. Nothing. Congratulations, I said louder, stabbing at the potatoes. Samuel jumped in to keep things civil, telling a story about a tricky surgery he'd performed. My parents beamed with pride, nodding along at every medical term like they understood. Then Victoria steered the spotlight back where she liked it. You know, Jess, maybe one day you'll have something to share like that, she said. If you find the right path, you can't just drift forever. I didn't rise to the bait. I'd learned that silence was sometimes sharper than words, but she wasn't done. When dessert rolled around, she slid a small gift bag across the table toward me. For you, she said with mock cheer. I opened it slowly, pulling out a Walmart gift card. $50. I thought you could use this, she explained, her tone dripping with fake concern. Pick up some new clothes. Maybe something professional. For job interviews. The room went quiet. My mom looked embarrassed, my dad cleared his throat, and Samuel stared at the table. No one said a word to stop her. I turned the card in my hand, pretending to study it. Then I smiled. How thoughtful, Vic. Always looking out for me. Her grin widened, certain she'd scored another victory. The truth was, moments like that used to sting. Years ago, I might have snapped back or left the table altogether. But now, I let it wash over me. Because while she thought she was humiliating me, all she was really doing was setting the stage. Dinner carried on, the conversation circling back to her firm, Samuel's patience, Daniel's investments. Every accomplishment laid out like trophies. And every time the spotlight even brushed against me, it was with pity. So, Jess, my mom finally asked gently, are you comfortable? Do you have what you need? I'm fine, Mom, I said. Victoria jumped in before I could add more. Fine? That's not exactly confidence, inspiring. Come on, Jess. What do you actually do these days? Do you even have steady work? I manage, I said evenly, taking a sip of water. She leaned back, shaking her head. You're 34, Jess. At some point, managing stops being cute. Don't you want stability? Security? I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but I kept my voice calm. Security means different things to different people. Not really, she shot back. It means money in the bank, a reliable career, the ability to take care of family. That's universal. Samuel looked uncomfortable, but he didn't speak up. My parents avoided my eyes. The message was clear. Victoria's definition was the family's definition, and I was failing it. I pushed my chair back slightly, not to leave, just to breathe. The hum of conversation filled the silence I left behind, everyone carefully avoiding the obvious tension. Inside, though, something settled. I'd sat through years of these digs, swallowed them whole, let them chip away at me. But tonight, the pattern felt almost scripted, predictable. And that predictability gave me clarity. Victoria thought she was in control, thought she had written my role as the struggling sister. She didn't realize how wrong she was. The gift card still sat on the table in front of me, the little plastic rectangle shining under the dining room light. I slid it back into the bag, tied the handles neatly, and set it aside. Thank you again, I said, my voice even. I'll put it to good use. Her eyes sparkled with triumph. I let her have it, because every word, every insult, every so-called act of generosity was fuel, and I had more patience than she could ever imagine. The plates were barely cleared when Victoria snapped open a leather folder and spread papers across the table like she was presenting a case in court. Daniel leaned in beside her, adjusting his cufflinks, already prepared to play supporting counsel. All right, she said briskly. Let's get down to business. Mom and Dad's situation isn't going to take care of itself. Samuel shifted in his seat, clearly aware of what was coming, while my mom reached for her water glass, her hands trembling just a little. My dad stayed quiet in his recliner, his eyes tired but attentive. Victoria tapped the papers. Here are the numbers. Between Dad's medical needs and Mom's therapy sessions, plus living expenses, we're looking at a significant cost. Insurance covers some, but not nearly enough. Daniel took over, his banker's voice smooth and practiced. We're projecting about $12,000 a month, conservatively. That includes part-time nursing care and potential assisted living within the next year. The words hung heavy. My mom's face paled. 12,000? Victoria patted her hand gently, like she was soothing a child. Don't worry, Mom. We've got this under control. Then she looked around the table, her gaze locking on me. The question is how we divide the responsibility. Samuel cleared his throat. I can contribute. Obviously, my schedule is packed, but financially I can help. Of course you can, Victoria said, nodding. And Daniel and I are prepared to shoulder the bulk of it. She paused, her eyes sliding back to me. Which leaves Jess. I stayed quiet, letting her keep talking. Now, obviously, she continued, her tone softening into condescension, we don't expect equal contributions from everyone. That wouldn't be fair. Samuel is successful in his field. Daniel and I are fortunate in ours. Jess, she let my name hang in the air like a diagnosis. Jess can contribute what she's able. Daniel slid a paper toward me. We've worked out a fair distribution. We'll cover 70%. Samuel, 20. That leaves 10% for you. About $1,200 a month. My mom looked at me with sympathy. as if she'd already assumed I couldn't handle it. My dad shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Samuel gave me a look that mixed pity with apology. Victoria folded her hands, watching me like a cat studying a mouse. Of course, if that's too much, we can adjust. Maybe you contribute in other ways. Personal care, errands, visits. We wouldn't want to put you in a difficult position. I glanced at the neat columns of numbers in front of me. My entire military salary from years ago could have covered that monthly cost without blinking, and now, with my Pentagon position and other income streams, it was barely a fraction. But that wasn't the point. The point was the assumption. The casual way she dismissed me, decided my worth for me, reduced me to the struggling sister who couldn't possibly carry her share. I slid the paper back across the table. 1200's manageable. That. Victoria blinked, surprised for a split second before regaining her composure. Well, if you're sure, we just don't want you to, what's the word? Overextend. Daniel chimed in. It's important that everyone understands their role. This only works if we're realistic. Samuel nodded weakly. It's a fair system. I caught his eye and saw the same thing I'd seen my entire life: pity. He thought he was being kind by lowering expectations. He thought I should be grateful they weren't asking me for more. Inside, my jaw clenched. That look was worse than Victoria's digs. At least she was direct. Samuel's pity was quieter, but cut just as deep. Victoria shuffled her papers back into the folder, clearly pleased with herself. Good. I'm glad we're all in agreement. This is the kind of cooperation families need. Everyone contributing according to their abilities. End of 40. The room relaxed a little, the tension breaking as my mom started asking about dessert, but I stayed focused on the taste of humiliation in my mouth. They thought they'd done me a favor by assigning me the smallest piece of responsibility, like handing a child a toy hammer while the adults built the house. I nodded politely, offered to clear the dishes, and carried plates into the kitchen. Behind me, I could hear Victoria's voice rising again, already spinning the story in her favor. It's lucky we're in the position we are. Not every family can manage this. She wanted applause. She wanted everyone to marvel at her generosity. And in their own way, they did. My mom thanked her for being so organized. My dad muttered something about being grateful. Samuel told her she'd thought of everything. No one noticed me washing dishes in silence. My back turned, my hands scrubbing harder than necessary. Victoria's control wasn't just about money. It was about narrative. She built the story where she was the savior, Samuel the helper, and I was the dependent, and everyone accepted it because it was easier than seeing me for who I really was. As I dried my hands, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. My face was calm, but my eyes told a different story. I'd sat through years of this script, and I knew one thing with absolute certainty. They weren't going to see me clearly until I forced them to. So I turned back toward the dining room, my voice steady. Thanks for putting this together, Vic. You always know how to take charge. She smiled, mistaking my words for praise. Well, someone has to. I smiled back, letting her enjoy the illusion. Because illusion don't last forever. The clinking of dishes and the low hum of post-dinner chatter should have eased the tension, but it didn't. If anything, the air felt heavier. My mom shuffled toward the kitchen, moving slower than she used to, and my dad sat back in his recliner with his eyes half closed, worn down by more than just the day. Samuel started flipping through his phone, probably checking hospital updates, and Victoria, well, she saw the lull as her chance to make one more point. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, her perfectly manicured nails tapping the folder she'd just closed. Let's be honest, she said, her tone light but cutting. Jess contributing 1,200 is symbolic at best. Daniel and I are covering the heavy lifting here. Samuel frowned. Vic. She cut him off. I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying we all know Jess's situation. She's been, what's the word? Drifting. This is about what's realistic. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, probably realizing she was taking it too far, but he didn't stop her. I stayed quiet, sipping water, watching her build up steam. Victoria turned directly to me, smiling like she was offering sisterly advice. Look, Jess, you've always had potential. But at some point, you have to admit that a military paycheck doesn't stretch very far. You're not a surgeon like Sam. You're not a partner at a top firm. You're just, well, you're just a soldier. The word just landed like a slap. She let it hang there before twisting the knife. You're a poor soldier, Jess. And that's okay. Families need all types. Some of us succeed and some of us, well, they do their best. The room went still. Samuel's face tightened, but he didn't speak. My mom fussed with napkins, avoiding eye contact. My dad's jaw clenched, but his voice didn't come. It was the same silence I'd lived with my entire life. The silence that let her get away with it. I set my glass down slowly, feeling every ounce of restraint in my body. Years of combat had trained me to stay calm under fire, but this wasn't enemy fire, it was worse. It was my own blood, sitting across from me, tearing me down like it was a sport. You done? I asked, my voice even. Victoria's smile widened. I'm just being realistic. Somebody has to be. I nodded once. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I didn't try to defend myself with a list of accomplishments she wouldn't care about anyway. Instead, I scrolled to one name and pressed call. Hey, I said when the line picked up. My tone was casual, almost cheerful. It's me. Are we still on schedule? A pause, then a voice on the other end confirmed. Good, I said. 15 minutes. The front lawn's fine. I hung up and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Victoria tilted her head, confused. What was that, ordering takeout? I smiled faintly. Just confirming a ride. She rolled her eyes. Let me guess, a taxi? Maybe Uber if you splurge? Samuel gave me a questioning look, but I didn't elaborate. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, calm, collected, letting the moment breathe. Victoria wasn't satisfied. She always wanted the last word. Jess, seriously, I don't know how you do it. I'd be embarrassed, living paycheck to paycheck at your age. But hey, at least you show up. That counts for something. Her laughter filled the room, sharp and self-satisfied. I felt the familiar burn rise in my chest, the same one I'd carried from high school dinners to deployment bunkers. But this time, it wasn't anger. It was clarity. For years, I'd kept quiet. For years, I'd let her shape the narrative, let my family sit in silence while she crowned herself queen of success. But tonight, she'd crossed the line. I stood, collected the empty plates from in front of me, and carried them into the kitchen. My movements were steady, deliberate. Behind me, her laughter trailed off when she realized I wasn't biting. As I rinsed the dishes, I caught my reflection in the window again. Same calm face, same steady eyes. But underneath, everything was shifting. I dried my hands, walked back to the table, and sat down like nothing had happened. You were saying? I asked lightly. Victoria smirked again, but this time it didn't land. Something in my tone unsettled her, though she couldn't place it. I leaned back, folded my arms, and let the silence build. The sound of the clock ticking in the hallway filled the room, marking each second closer to the moment I'd already set in motion. The sound came before the sight. A low, rhythmic thump in the distance, faint at first, then louder, steady, undeniable. The kind of sound that makes people stop mid-sentence without even realizing it. Victoria's voice faltered as the noise grew. What on earth is that? She asked, frowning toward the window. Samuel looked up from his phone, confused. My mom paused halfway through folding napkins, and my dad slowly lifted his head, brows furrowed. Even Daniel leaned forward, his banker's composure slipping. The thumping grew louder, rattling the glass in the windows, and then, over the treetops, the sleek shape appeared. A Bell 429 helicopter, glossy black, descending with precision onto the open stretch of lawn in front of the house. The rotor wash bent the grass flat, sent leaves swirling, and shook the branches of the old maple tree. My mom gasped, clutching her chest. Richard, what is happening? My dad pushed himself upright, staring like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Samuel blinked rapidly, as if trying to reset his vision. Daniel muttered, That can't be legal. Victoria's eyes widened, her mouth open, then snapped shut. She turned to me sharply. Jess? What is this? I stood calmly, pushing my chair back without haste. That, I said evenly, would be my ride. The room froze. Victoria laughed, but it was shaky, uncertain. Your ride? Don't be ridiculous, you can't even… The words died as the helicopter settled onto the lawn, the noise filling every corner of the house. Through the window, The pilot in a crisp uniform lifted a hand in a casual wave, waiting. I picked up my duffel bag from where I'd dropped it hours earlier and slung it over my shoulder. "Dinner was lovely," I said, straightening my jacket. "But I have somewhere I'd like to take you all." I'll quote. No one moved. My mom stammered. "Jess, is that for you?" I met her eyes calm and steady. "Yes, Mom. It's for me." Samuel opened his mouth, closed it again, then finally asked, "You chartered a helicopter? For what?" I adjusted the strap on my shoulder. Because walking out of this house in a taxi wasn't quite the message I needed to send tonight. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the rhythmic thrum of the blades outside. Victoria finally found her voice, sharp and defensive. "This is insane. You can't just land a helicopter on our parents' lawn." I smiled faintly. "Seems I can." I walked toward the door, the sound growing louder with each step. Behind me, chairs scraped as the others scrambled to follow. Out on the porch, the scene was surreal. The massive machine crouched on the grass, blades still spinning, the pilot standing by, professional and unbothered. The downwash tugged at my hair and clothes, but I didn't flinch. I turned back to face my family, their expressions ranging from shock to disbelief to a dawning awareness they couldn't quite process. "Jess," my dad said hoarsely, his voice breaking. "What's going on?" I looked at him steadily. "What's going on is that I'm not the person you've all decided I am, and it's time you saw the truth." Victoria shook her head, her composure cracking. "You can't just show up poor 1 minute and step into a helicopter the next. That doesn't happen." "Maybe not for you," I said. "But then you never really knew what I've been building, did you?" Her face flushed red, but she had no comeback. I stepped closer to my mom, lowering my voice over the roar. "I want you and Dad to come with me. All of you, actually. There's something you need to see." My mom's eyes darted from me to the helicopter and back, overwhelmed but trusting. My dad, still pale, nodded slowly. Samuel stared at me like I was speaking another language, and Daniel looked like he was mentally calculating the hourly cost of the flight. Victoria folded her arms, forcing a scoff. "This is absurd. You're staging some kind of stunt. For what? To prove a point?" I met her eyes, calm as ever. "Exactly." The pilot gestured that we needed to move if we were coming. I motioned toward the open cabin door, leather seats gleaming inside. "Shall we?" No one moved at first. Then my mom stepped forward, clutching her purse tight like a lifeline. "Richard," she said, turning to my dad. "Let's go." My dad pushed himself up, leaning on her arm, his eyes never leaving me. Samuel followed slowly, still stunned. Daniel muttered something under his breath, but trailed after his wife. "And Victoria?" She hesitated, her pride battling her curiosity. Finally, with a huff, she stormed down the steps. "Fine, but this doesn't change anything. End of tree." I didn't bother replying. Some lessons can't be taught with words. We climbed aboard, the cabin humming with quiet luxury, nothing like the military birds I'd spent years in. My family settled awkwardly into the seats, still trying to process what was happening. I slid into place, nodded to the pilot, and the helicopter lifted off. As the ground fell away, I glanced at my sister. For the first time in years, she wasn't smirking, wasn't mocking, wasn't in control. She was silent. The town shrank beneath us, the streets and rooftops giving way to open fields. My mom clutched my dad's hand. Samuel stared out the window, his face pale. Daniel tried to look unimpressed, but his grip on the seat betrayed him, and Victoria sat stiffly, lips pressed tight, her eyes darting between me and the view outside. I leaned back, my voice steady over the headset. "You've spent years deciding who I am. Tonight, I'll show you who I really am." No one answered. The only sound was the steady thrum of the blades carrying us toward the truth. The helicopter cut smoothly across the fields until the skyline shifted and the land opened into a wide estate. The main house came into view first, a renovated brick mansion with tall windows and a slate roof, standing like it had belonged there for a century. Behind it stretched rolling lawns, a small lake glinting under the moonlight, and further out, modern buildings designed with sharp lines and glass that caught the light even in the dusk. My mom leaned forward, clutching my dad's hand tighter. "Jessica, where are we?" The pilot angled us lower, bringing the helipad into view, freshly marked and illuminated. As we descended, Samuel pressed closer to the window, eyes narrowing in disbelief. Daniel gave a low whistle. Victoria didn't say a word, her jaw was clenched so tight I could see it even behind her headset. The helicopter settled gently, the blades slowing as the pilot powered down. When the door opened, the night air rushed in, cool and clean. I stepped out first, waiting as the others followed one by one. My mom's voice trembled. "This is yours?" "Yes," I said simply. "And it's not just a house. Come inside." We crossed the stone walkway, lights guiding us to the main entrance. The door opened before I could touch it. Margaret, my longtime assistant, stood waiting with her tablet in hand. "Evening, Captain Monroe," she said with a professional smile. "Everything's prepared." Victoria's head snapped toward me. "Captain?" she repeated sharply. I ignored her and gestured for everyone to follow. Inside, the foyer opened into high ceilings, polished wood, and the kind of quiet elegance that money alone can't fake. A chandelier cast warm light over the marble floor. The place wasn't designed to impress for show, it was designed to last. My parents stopped just inside, taking it in. Samuel stepped forward, running a hand along the railing of the grand staircase. "Jess, this is unbelievable." Victoria finally found her voice. "This is ridiculous. You rent this, or borrowed it. You don't own this." I met her glare. "I own it." Then I gestured toward the glass doors at the far end of the hall. "But what I really want you to see is out there." End of 4. We stepped through into the courtyard, where another building stood lit up against the night. It wasn't flashy, simple lines, wide glass walls, clean brickwork. Inside, the soft glow revealed common rooms, hallways, and people moving about. Nurses in uniform, residents in comfortable chairs, staff carrying out quiet duties. My mom's hand flew to her mouth. "Jess, is this?" "Yes," I said. "This is Valor House Foundation." I led them inside. The scent was warm and clean, not sterile like hospitals. Soft music played in the background, and along one wall hung photos of veterans, each with a name and story beneath. A nurse greeted me as we passed. "Evening, Captain?" "Evening," I said back before turning to my family. "This is what I've been building for the last 3 years. A place for veterans who need care, dignity, and community. But it's not just for them, it's also for people like Mom and Dad. We built a senior care wing specifically for cases like theirs." Victoria barked out a laugh, sharp and dismissive. "You expect us to believe you founded this? You, who couldn't even—" She trailed off, realizing her old insults didn't fit the scene around her. I didn't bother responding to her. Instead, I walked them through the hallways, showing the private suites, the therapy rooms, the gardens designed for memory care patients. Every detail had been built intentionally. Wide hallways for easy mobility, bright but soothing colors, even shadow-free lighting to reduce confusion. Samuel stopped at one of the therapy rooms, watching a group of residents painting with an instructor. His voice was quiet. "This is advanced. You've thought of everything." "I had help," I said. "Doctors, therapists, architects. We designed it to be the opposite of those cold institutional facilities. This place is about life, not just survival." My mom's eyes were wet. She reached out and touched my arm. "You did this? All of this?" "Yes, Mom," I said softly. "For you and Dad. For people like the ones I served with. For the ones who don't have anyone to look out for them." Victoria shook her head hard, refusing to accept it. "This is insane. There's no way you could afford this, unless you're lying. Did you marry into money? Did you—" "I funded it," I said flatly. "After years of service, after building partnerships, after putting in work you never bothered to ask about, and I set up a trust so Mom and Dad's care is fully covered for life." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by my mom's quiet sob. She clung to my dad, who stood straighter than he had in months, his eyes locked on me with something I hadn't seen in years: pride. Victoria's voice cracked as she tried again. You can't expect us to believe you've been hiding this. You come home with duffel bags and cheap shoes and act like—" "Because it was easier," I cut in sharply. "Easier than fighting every dinner table debate. Easier than being told I'd made a mistake. Easier than hearing you laugh at me while Mom and Dad stayed silent." I built this quietly, without your approval, because I didn't need it. Victoria stared at me, stunned into silence. I turned back to my parents, softening my tone. This is your place now. Whenever you're ready, everything is set. No waiting lists, no bills, no worry about running out of savings. You'll have the best care, the best doctors, the best support. And you'll have it because I wanted you to. My mom broke into tears, covering her face. My dad squeezed her shoulder, his own eyes wet. Jessica, he said, voice trembling. I was wrong. For a moment, the weight of years of doubt and dismissal lifted. And then Victoria snapped. Number! This doesn't erase everything. You think showing us some building makes you the hero? You've been lying, Jess. You let us believe you were barely scraping by. You humiliated this family by hiding behind your secrets. Her voice cracked at the edges, but her anger burned through. I looked at her steadily. The only thing I did was let you underestimate me. The rest? That was all you. She flushed red, her hands balling into fists. Daniel shifted uneasily, but stayed quiet. Samuel stepped back, glancing between us, clearly torn. But me? I stood grounded in the very building I had created, letting the truth speak louder than any insult she could throw. We gathered in the main lounge of Valor House, the tall windows stretching from floor to ceiling, framing the courtyard outside. My family sat stiffly on the leather sofas, their eyes flicking from me to the room around them like they were still waiting for someone to yell, "Surprise," and tell them this was all a prank. Margaret entered quietly and set a thick portfolio on the coffee table in front of me. I rested my hand on it for a moment before sliding it toward my parents. This, I said, my voice steady, is every detail. The trust, the contracts, the foundation's charter, and the medical agreements already prepared in both your names. My mom hesitated, glancing at my dad. He nodded slowly, and together they opened the binder. Page after page detailed the provisions I'd put in place, permanent funding drawn from investments, property deeds, operating budgets, care plans, staff rosters. It was airtight. Samuel leaned forward, scanning a page. His voice was low, measured. This is thorough. Legal, medical, financial, it's all covered. Daniel reached across him, pulling a page closer. His banker's eyes darted over the figures, the signatures, the legal stamps. He leaned back finally, shaking his head in disbelief. This isn't just a token foundation, this is a full operation, multi-million easily. My dad's hands trembled as he traced his name on the trust document. Jessica, you did this for us? Yes, I said simply. Because you deserve more than fear about the future. And because I could. Tears slipped down my mom's cheeks as she touched the paper. We thought you didn't have enough for yourself. I looked at her gently. That's because I let you think that. The words hit the room like a dropped stone in water. The ripples spread across every face. Victoria scoffed, her voice brittle. So you admit it. You deceived us. You let us think you were struggling while you played this secret millionaire game. How? I turned my gaze on her, steady and calm. I didn't lie, Victoria. I just stopped correcting your assumptions. Every time you told me I was poor, or drifting, or wasting my life, I let you believe it. Because trying to convince you otherwise was like shouting into the wind. Her jaw clenched, color rising in her cheeks. You humiliated me. All of us. Do you know how many times I defended you to friends? Told them my sister was just finding her path? Do you realize how foolish you made me look? I tilted my head slightly. Foolish? Or just wrong? Her mouth opened, then shut. Words caught in her throat. Samuel cleared his throat, breaking the silence. His voice was softer than usual. Jess, I owe you an apology. I thought I was protecting you by lowering expectations, but all I was doing was disrespecting you. I met his eyes. For once, there was no pity in them, only honesty. Thank you, Sam. My mom reached out and gripped my hand. We never meant to make you feel less. We just didn't understand. That's the point, I said gently but firmly. You didn't try to understand. You were too busy fitting me into a box you recognized. Victoria bristled. Don't turn this on us. You're the one who chose secrecy. If you had just told us, this wouldn't have been a shock. I leaned forward slightly. And if I had told you, what would have happened? You would have minimized it, mocked it, twisted it into something less, just like you did with everything else. Tonight isn't about me hiding, it's about you finally being forced to see. The words sat heavy between us. For the first time, Victoria didn't fire back immediately. Her eyes darted to Daniel, who stayed silent, then to Samuel, who was still studying the documents. She looked cornered, like the walls she'd built were crumbling faster than she could patch them. My dad's voice cut through the tension, rough, unsteady, but clear. "Jessica, I'm proud of you." The room went still. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the truth in his eyes. The man who once told me I'd regret my choice for the rest of my life was finally saying the words I'd waited decades to hear. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay composed. "Thank you, Dad." My mom dabbed her eyes with a tissue, her voice breaking. "We're so sorry. We should have seen you. We should have asked. We should have believed in you." I shook my head. "You don't need to be sorry. You just need to understand that success doesn't always look like you expect it to. And mine looks like this." I gestured around the room, to the building, to the staff quietly working in the background, to the legacy already in motion. Daniel leaned forward again, his voice cautious but respectful now. "This kind of operation requires serious backing. Who's managing your investments?" I gave him a small smile. "I am. With a team, of course. Military discipline translates well to building systems that work." He nodded, almost impressed, despite himself. Victoria finally snapped, her voice rising. "So what, you get to play the hero now? You think this makes you better than us? You think a helicopter and some shiny buildings erase the fact that you let us believe you were nothing?" I met her fury with calm. "I don't think I'm better. I think I'm free. Free from your definitions, free from the silence, free from the shadow you tried to keep me in. And I think tonight proves that the only thing holding me back was the story you kept telling." I meant to they. She stared at me, speechless, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't quite form the words. Samuel sat back finally, exhaling. "She's right, Vic. We never gave her the chance to be anything else." My mom reached over, clutching my dad's hand with one of hers and mine with the other. Her voice shook, but it was steady enough. "We see you now, Jess. We see you." The silence that followed wasn't the suffocating kind anymore. It was full, heavy, but alive with shock, with regret, with the beginning of something different. Victoria sat rigid on the couch, arms folded, her breathing sharp and uneven. For once, she wasn't smirking. She wasn't in control. The papers on the table glared at her, like evidence in a courtroom, undeniable and heavy. Samuel leaned back, silent, giving her space. Daniel fidgeted with his tie, clearly wishing he could be anywhere else. My mom dabbed at her eyes while my dad sat with his hand still on mine, steadier than I'd seen him in months. Victoria finally spoke, but her voice cracked in a way I'd never heard before. "You made me look like a fool. I've spent years climbing, fighting, clawing my way to prove myself. And all this time you were sitting on this." I didn't answer right away. I just watched her, the cracks spreading through her perfect posture. Her eyes were sharper than usual, but not with arrogance, with fear. She pushed herself to her feet, pacing across the rug like a caged animal. "Do you have any idea the pressure I've been under? Every case, every client, every deal, it's been about survival. Keeping the image, making sure nobody saw weakness. And you," she spun toward me, her voice rising. "You let me believe you were beneath me. Do you know what that did to me?" The words rang strange in my ears. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize her. This wasn't the Victoria who relished cutting me down. This was someone unraveling. Samuel finally spoke. "Vic, this isn't about you looking foolish. This is about Jess building something incredible." She shot him a glare. "Of course you'd say that. You're the golden boy, the doctor. You've never had to prove anything beyond your test scores. You don't understand what it's like to wake up every day terrified of losing the image you've built." Whine. Her voice trembled on the last words. She stopped pacing, pressing her palms against the back of a chair like she needed it to hold her up. I stood, slowly, and faced her. My voice stayed calm, level. "I didn't do this to humiliate you. I didn't do this to you at all. I did it because I had to. Because building something real was the only way I knew how to breathe." She shook her head violently. "You did it in secret. You wanted the reveal, the shock. You wanted to watch me break. End of chapter. I took a step closer, lowering my voice. I wanted you to see me, not the caricature you decided I was. Me. Her eyes filled with something I never thought I'd see: moisture. She blinked hard, fighting it, but her mask was slipping faster than she could hold it. Daniel cleared his throat softly. Vic. She cut him off with a sharp wave. Don't you dare. She turned back to me, her voice quieter now. Do you know what it's like, Jess? To spend your life terrified that if you stumble once, the whole world sees you as a fraud? To marry into money, to work cases 18 hours a day, to smile at galas while your stomach knots because you don't even know if you believe in the life you built? The words spilled out fast, raw, uncontrolled. And for the first time, everyone listened. Samuel leaned forward, his voice gentle. Vic, nobody forced you into that life. Her laugh was bitter, sharp. Didn't they? Didn't we all? This family had one script: success, achievement, appearances. You followed it, Sam. You thrived in it. I made it look good. And Jess, she pointed at me, her hand shaking. Jess was the failure, the one who didn't fit. I needed her to be the failure, because if she wasn't, then what the hell was I killing myself for? The room went still. Even my mom, still clutching tissues, sat straighter. My dad's eyes softened with a pain that had nothing to do with his illness. I didn't move. I let her words hang there, because they weren't really aimed at me. They were her confession, spoken out loud for the first time. She dropped into the chair, her shoulders sagging. You don't get it. I don't sleep, I barely eat. Daniel and I fight constantly because I'm never home. And still, it's never enough. I've built everything on the idea that I'm better, smarter, stronger. And now? She trailed off, her eyes darting to the binder on the table. Now it turns out I'm not. I lowered myself into the chair across from her. Vic, this isn't a competition. Her laugh was hollow. It's always a competition. With you, with Sam, with anyone who might expose the cracks. That's how I was raised. That's how I survived. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the HVAC and the muffled voices of staff moving down the hall. Finally, I leaned forward. My tone was calm, but firm. I didn't build this to beat you. I built this to matter, to do something real. If your life feels empty, that's not on me. That's on the choices you made. Her eyes flicked up to mine, angry, but also desperate. And what if I don't know how to make different ones? The question stunned the room. Daniel looked down at his hands. Samuel sat back, absorbing it. My mom reached for her daughter's hand, but Victoria pulled away, still fighting the contact. I took a slow breath. Then maybe for the first time in your life, you stop pretending you've got it all figured out. Maybe you admit you need help. Maybe you start fresh. She looked away, jaw tight, but the silence spoke for her. She didn't have a comeback. For years, she'd been the one in control, the one dictating terms, the one cutting me down. And now, in the quiet of Valor House, she sat exposed, not the unshakable attorney, but a sister carrying more fear than she could hide. And in that moment, the cracks in her armor weren't just visible, they were undeniable. The silence after Victoria's outburst hung in the air, heavy and raw. For the first time in years, nobody seemed sure of their roles. My mom wasn't rushing to smooth things over. My dad wasn't retreating into silence. Samuel wasn't offering half-hearted medical metaphors. And Victoria, well, she sat slouched in the chair, stripped of her usual armor. I leaned back, giving everyone a moment to breathe. Then Samuel broke it, his voice lower than usual. Jess, I owe you something I should have said years ago. I'm sorry. I thought I was being supportive by keeping expectations low, but the truth is, I just didn't believe in you. I didn't even try. And that was wrong. His words landed heavier than I expected. Not because I hadn't heard apologies before, but because Samuel rarely admitted fault to anyone. My dad actually turned his head toward him, eyebrows raised, like he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. I nodded once. Thank you, Sam. That means more than you know. My mom reached for my hand again, her voice trembling. We failed you too, Jess. We didn't listen. We didn't ask. We were too busy comparing you to what we thought success looked like. And we let Victoria's voice drown out yours. Her eyes flicked toward her eldest daughter. Victoria didn't meet her gaze. My dad cleared his throat, his voice shaky but firm. I told you once you'd regret your path. I was wrong. I regret saying it. I regret not seeing what you were building. And I regret not standing up when your sister cut you down. For a second, the room blurred in my vision. Years of holding back tears had trained me well, but hearing my dad's voice cracked with illness yet laced with pride nearly broke the dam. I steadied myself with a breath. I don't need perfect words, I said quietly. I just need honesty. That's all I've ever wanted. Samuel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Then here's honesty. You've done something extraordinary, and we owe you more respect than we've ever given you. For once, his voice didn't sound like pity. It sounded like truth. I glanced at Victoria. She sat stiffly, her eyes red-rimmed, lips pressed tight. The fight had gone out of her, but the pride was still there, coiled like a snake not ready to release. You don't have to like me, I said, addressing her directly. But you do have to stop dismissing me, because whether you admit it or not, I've earned my place here. Her eyes flicked up to mine, anger flashing for a split second before fading into something closer to exhaustion. She didn't reply, but she didn't argue either. And that, from her, was progress. Dinner at Valor House was quieter than the one at our parents' home. Chef Thomas had prepared roast beef, roasted vegetables, and bread still warm from the oven. My family sat around the long oak table, the clatter of silverware filling the gaps where sharp words usually lived. My mom smiled faintly as she tasted the food. This is wonderful. You didn't have to go to all this trouble. I didn't, I said. This is just a Tuesday here. That got a small laugh out of Samuel. Even my dad managed to smile. For a brief moment, the tension eased, and we were just a family eating together, not perfect, not healed, but together. Midway through the meal, Victoria finally spoke. Her voice was softer, stripped of its usual edge. I don't know how to do this. Everyone paused, forks suspended. She kept her eyes on her plate. I don't know how to sit here and not feel like I'm losing. My whole life has been about winning, proving, and now, she exhaled shakily. Now I don't know who I am if I'm not the best. Daniel reached for her hand, but she pulled it back before he could touch her. I set my fork down. Maybe it's not about being the best anymore. Maybe it's about being real. Because trust me, being underestimated your whole life teaches you something. Winning isn't what makes you whole. Her shoulders trembled. For a moment, she looked like she might argue, but instead she pressed her napkin to her eyes. The silence that followed wasn't hostile. It was fragile, uncertain, but human. After dinner, I led them to the west wing of the house. The guest rooms were ready, comfortable beds, fresh linens, quiet lamps casting warm light. My mom touched the quilt on the bed like it was something precious. This feels safe, she whispered. That's the point, I said. You don't have to worry anymore. Luck. My dad lowered himself carefully onto the mattress, looking around the room. You built this for people like us? Yes, I answered. For veterans, for families, for anyone who deserved more than just scraping by. I wanted people to have dignity. His eyes lingered on me, filled with something deeper than words. Later, we gathered again in the lounge, coffee cups in hand. My mom shared a story about my childhood, one I hadn't heard in years. Samuel chimed in with a memory of us building a treehouse together. Even Daniel loosened enough to ask thoughtful questions about how Valor House was funded. Victoria stayed quiet, staring into her cup, but she didn't leave. That in itself was a small victory. As the evening wound down, I realized something. Reconciliation wasn't about erasing the past. It wasn't about making Victoria suddenly cheer for me or my parents magically rewriting years of silence. It was about creating enough space for honesty to live where denial used to. It was messy. It was fragile. And it was real. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough. Morning sunlight poured through the tall windows, spilling across the breakfast table set with fresh pastries, fruit, and steaming coffee. My family sat together again, less rigid than the night before. My mom looked rested, my dad's color was better, and Samuel was already making small talk with the chef about seasoning. Even Daniel had lost some of that stiff banker posture. And Victoria, she sat quietly at the end of the table, stirring her coffee without saying much. For once, she wasn't directing the conversation or competing for center stage. My mom broke the silence first. This house feels different in the morning, peaceful. like it's been waiting for us. I smiled softly. That's the idea. A place where people can breathe again. Samuel set down his cup. Jess, I walked through the care wing early this morning. Talked with one of the nurses. The setup you've built, it's not just impressive. It's necessary. You've created something that will outlast all of us. Hearing him say it without pity, without condescension, made my chest tighten. That was the goal, I said simply. Daniel cleared his throat, his tone measured, but respectful. From a financial perspective, this is one of the most stable nonprofit operations I've ever seen. The investments, the trust structure, it's airtight. Honestly, I'm impressed. I nodded once. Coming from you, that means something. Victoria finally looked up, her eyes tired but softer. I don't know what to say. You don't have to, I replied. Not everything needs a speech. Her lips pressed together, but she gave the smallest nod. That alone felt like progress. After breakfast, I led them outside for a walk through the gardens. The lake sparkled in the morning light, ducks moving lazily across the surface. My dad walked slowly, but steadier than usual, his hand in my mom's Samuel, helped him down a small path while I pointed out the benches and trails designed for residents to use safely. We stopped by a gazebo overlooking the water, and someone suggested a photo. Margaret appeared, camera ready, as if she'd anticipated it. For the first time in years, we stood side by side, my parents, Samuel, Victoria, and Daniel, all in one frame. The smiles weren't perfect. They weren't rehearsed. But they were real. As the shutter clicked, I realized something I hadn't before. Revenge had never been the real goal. Proving myself, yes. Making them see me differently, absolutely. But revenge? That word felt too small for what this had become. Later, back inside, my dad eased into a chair in the lounge, his voice quiet but clear. You know, Jess, I spent too many years thinking honor was about following the expected path. Career, family, stability. I never thought honor could look like this. I sat across from him, my throat tightening. Honor isn't about what it looks like from the outside. It's about what you stand for when no one believes in you. That's what the Army taught me. And that's what this place stands for. That. My mom wiped at her eyes again, smiling faintly. We're proud of you, sweetheart. Truly proud. Samuel put a hand on my shoulder, solid and warm. You've done more than we ever imagined. And you did it your way. That takes courage. Even Victoria spoke, her voice low but genuine. I may not like how you did it, but I can't deny it anymore. You've built something real, something that matters. I met her gaze steady. That's all I ever wanted for you to see it. That. She looked away first, but not with anger, more with something like acceptance. The rest of the day passed with fewer sharp edges. Conversations turned to stories from childhood, memories we hadn't touched in years. My mom laughed about the time I tried to march the neighborhood kids through boot camp in the backyard. Samuel teased Victoria about her high school debate obsession. Even Daniel loosened enough to share a story about nearly burning a soufflé at one of their dinner parties. It wasn't perfect. Old habits still lingered. But for the first time, the foundation felt different, like maybe we could build something new on top of it. That evening, as the sun dipped low, I stepped out onto the terrace alone. The air was cool, the lake reflecting streaks of gold and orange. Behind me, I could still hear faint laughter from inside. I thought about the years I'd spent carrying the weight of silence, the years of being underestimated, dismissed, treated like a background character in my own family. And I thought about the helicopter. The moment everything shifted, the look on their faces when they finally realized who I really was. It had felt like victory in that moment. But now, standing on the terrace, I realized victory wasn't the point. The point was freedom. Freedom from the story they'd written for me. Freedom from needing their validation. Freedom to build a life that mattered on my own terms. And in that freedom, I'd found something better than revenge. I'd found connection. I turned back toward the house, watching the lights glow warmly against the night. Inside, my family was waiting. Not perfect, not healed, but present. And for the first time, I felt like they truly saw me not just as the poor soldier, not just as the middle child, but as the woman who had chosen her path and stood by it. That was the real ending. Not the helicopter, not the mansion, not even the foundation. The real ending was sitting across from my family, knowing I didn't need their approval anymore, but having it anyway. I exhaled slowly, letting the weight of years lift off my shoulders. True wealth, I murmured to myself, isn't in the money or the titles. It's in being able to stand as yourself, without apology, and still be loved. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. Looking back, I spent years thinking the only way to prove myself was through silence. Let them laugh, let them underestimate, let them believe their version of me. But the truth is, I didn't need to humiliate them to win. What I needed was to stand tall in my own story and let the truth speak louder than their judgment. Yes, the helicopter turned heads. Yes, the estate stunned them. But the real victory wasn't about the shock. It was about finally being honest about who I am, what I've built, and what really matters. Family will always find ways to judge you, to put you in boxes that fit their comfort. Sometimes you fight back, sometimes you walk away. And sometimes, if you're patient enough, you show them so much truth that the box breaks on its own. That night with my family, I learned something I should have known long ago. Honor isn't about rank or money or trophies. It's about refusing to shrink just because someone else needs you small. And when you finally stop shrinking, that's when they see you not as the failure, not as the afterthought, but as the person you were meant to be all along.